wanted to talk about reading or predicting for yourself. One of the things that people have a huge issue, and often many are professionals, is making their own prediction or forecasting or kind of seeing the situation clearly. Now, one of the things I find, don't know what that was going over the screen, one of the things I find very interesting just in general is that, and this happens with professional readers reading other people, is that they are, it's either their kind of own experience that holds their view. So instead of actually reading what's coming up, they're then trying to put it in the context of the current, of what they think the situation is, or the boundaries, or the current experience that they've had. Now, this creates difficulties because you are then projecting onto that person a lot of information that you might not know. In prediction, shouldn't do that. You've got to be detached, and you've got to be able to look objectively. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be completely objective, especially on situations where you're reading for yourself, which I know lots of people have difficulties with. When you're reading for yourself, it's really hard to be fully objective, but you do need to try and look at this objectively. And if you have a strong reaction to any of the potential outcomes, then you need to take a step back and then perhaps kind of work out why you have that strong reaction. So if you're doing relationship readings, for instance, for yourself, and the card's going, oh, no, there's, it's not happening, and you have a really strong reaction to that, you have a choice. You either don't read, or you look at what that strong reaction is, and then you try and read again. Because then you kind of look at what is kind of what the cards are actually saying, because the cards might not be saying exactly what you've projected on, because a lot of the times one of the reasons why self-reading fails for people is because they're projecting onto the cards, they're deciding what the cards should say and wanting the cards to fit in. So if you're saying you're looking at something and they don't make sense, it's often because you've decided what in your head what cards you expect to pull out. Same with astrology. You look at it and you go, okay, well, I know it's going to happen. I know this is going to happen because I want it so much. Of course it's going to happen. And when it doesn't happen, it's like, okay, you need to go back and work out how you failed in that prediction. Is it because you were too invested in the answer, in a particular answer? Now, this doesn't happen just personally. For personal issues or self-reading, look at the elections, the last American election, where most people didn't want to see Trump in. So what they did was, in their heads, they just didn't think it was going to happen. And because they didn't think that possibility was going to happen, they predicted something. And a lot of them went against their normal practices. So a lot of people who could only have to use exact times didn't have a time for Hillary and a chart for Trump, and they still tried to apply their methods to predict, instead of actually going, oh, well, I can't use that method, but they had determined in their head that Trump can't win, because it's stupid, it's ridiculous, he can't win. And being attached to an outcome will lead you to find facts so that you verify that outcome. And it's reading for other people and it's reading for yourself. So you do need to have an understanding of what brings out really strong reactions, emotional reactions in you. So if you're reading, as I said, if you're reading cards for yourself and you're like, this can't mean that, and then you throw the cards out again, because obviously as readers we do that. We don't want to see the answers, so we throw the cards out again. You need to take a step back. If you do a horror read and you go, well, actually, if I do a horror read now, then the moon is void, so nothing's going to happen. I'm going to wait till this. You're trying to, again, manufacture the outcome. You should actually be able to go that it's void, nothing's going to happen, or go void, it's not something I should be asking. So we do need to think about how we do that. And also beware of readers doing this. So, very professional readers who've been reading a long time will often read your desires. So you get a great reading because they turn around and they say, oh yeah, all these things are amazing, but they're all the things that you want, exactly what you want. And then they don't happen because they're really reading your desires, and what you're projecting out, rather than actually what's going to happen. So it's a really important exercise to understand how and what you're reading with energy, and maybe I'll do another video on that. But when you're self-reading, just look at what your expectations are. How are you going to feel if it comes out and it says, no, this is not happening, or yes, this is going to happen? And I see people do this for, they kind of set their own kind of trap up. They say, oh, okay, I'm going to this event. And so they ask, and they're nervous and they're worried, they're anxious, and then they pull out cards and it'll come up with the Tower, or kind of like, I'm trying to think, the Three of Swords, or all these kind of Ten of Swords, and all these kind of not very pleasant cards for a kind of nice social event. But actually they haven't phrased the question. If you're going anywhere, try not to make yourself more anxious. You could be projecting onto that, because you could go along thinking it's going to be like a 9 or 10 of Swords, kind of nightmare-ish. And it could be the fact that you've kicked up and got so anxious over it from seeing those cards that you create that anxiety. It's much better to go, okay, tell me, if you're going already, tell me how to make this experience the best for me. I also see when people project out, when they're reading for someone, they read, it's a bit like, if we think about the non-binary, and we think about the different types of relationships that are out there now versus the traditional either heterosexual or homosexual relationships, which are basically same-sex, or it was either male, female, male, female, female. That was kind of a few years ago. That's all really, that was in the mainstream. Obviously, it's expanded now, but a lot of people are still kind of projecting on their views, looking at, if you're reading for somebody who is wants a polyamory, I can't even, who wants an alternative to monogamy in a relationship sphere, then if you think that's personally there's only really kind of monogamy and want two people in a relationship, then you're going to try and interpret those cards according to your own idea. So you actually have to be able to read the cards for what they are, rather than projecting on what you actually would expect it to be and what your experience is, because really your experience shouldn't really have a huge amount to say in the actual prediction. It should be in how you actually work through it to get to that prediction. But you need to be really careful of how you can limit yourself in readings, for yourself and for others. So let's just recap, because I've kind of gone off a little bit different areas. Watch your projections. Anything that you don't own, you're going to, anything that you get, any person that you get a really strong emotional reaction to, like they make you angry, that person at work and stuff like that, is usually because you're projecting onto them something about yourself you don't want to own. And it's hard when you look in a mirror and you see the parts that you don't like. It's very easy to go, oh, no, I don't like that. So, and you have to look at yourself and see why. And that's the same with kind of cards. You see a card come out and you're like, oh, I don't like this card. I don't like what it represents. I'm not this card. And actually you are. That other person could be reflecting back to it, or it could actually just show you. I talked briefly about having to stand back a little bit and try and be a little bit objective. It doesn't mean that you actually are going to be objective about the situation, but you have to be able to look at it objectively. You need to understand where you're reading from. Are you reading the other person's desires, or are you reading the energy of what's to come for them? And that takes a while to discern. And even for yourself, you need to understand where it is. If you've got a strong attachment to a particular outcome, then you're going to struggle to see other outcomes. So really, that's what you need to focus on when you have to think about when you're doing self-readings, or just readings as a professional reader. Just be clear about where you're reading from, and all those other things that that come in that you could be projecting onto another person. You could be projecting onto the cards, you could be projecting onto the reading, and a reader could be reading your projections. So there's all different ways of kind of looking at this subject, and maybe actually if you want me to do more on this subject, because it is a minefield, it's the reading energy and where you're reading it from, which I'm quite passionate about, is a huge field, and actually I could possibly link it to the doing one on auras. So let me know what you think of this, let me know any questions, and I will try and do those in other videos. Thank you.